All right, Bert. I have some observations.
It's the job for me.
Number 5, Bert. Frank Reich's firing shows that NFL owners are bad at hiring head coaches. Now, there are some owners who are really good at evaluating talent, picking the right coaches, picking the right players, drafting well, blah, 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 blah. But the majority of owners out there, Bert, are nothing more than billionaires playing real-life fantasy football. That's it. They're just whoever, they just roll the dice and just hope and pray they've gotten it right. And in Frank Reich's case, king of thieves here, fired twice in the last 13 months. Bert, I looked up the numbers. Still owed $36 million from the Colts through 2026. $36 million. And he's owed $30 million from the Panthers. They will pay him, somebody from one of the nerds on Twitter put this out, they will pay him $25,000 a day for the next 3 years to pay off that $30 million.
That's insane.
And it's bad because David Tepper, the owner, has to be one of the worst of all time. Here's shout out to Jack Kennedy on Twitter. Gave me David Tepper's timeline. Spent a 3rd-round pick on Will Grier, who's no longer on the team. Signed Teddy Bridgewater for $33 million guaranteed. And then he cut Cam Newton. Then you traded a 2nd and a 4th and a 6th for Sam Darnold. And then he traded Teddy Bridgewater for a 6th-round pick. And then he picked up Sam Darnold's $18.85 million option. And then he signed Cam Newton again. He spent a 3rd on Matt Corral, who I believe is no longer on the team.
Correct.
And then he traded for Baker Mayfield. And then he cut Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
And then he cut Cam again.
Then
he drafted Bryce Young over C.J. Stroud. And in between all that, hired Matt Rule, fired Matt Rule, hired Frank Reich, fired Frank Reich.
Yep.
He's been the owner for 4 years, Bert. He did all that.
I mean, yeah, your comparison to real life fantasy football is true. I mean, at one point you're taking on terrible contracts, you're signing and cutting individuals, and I mean, 2 head coaches you're running through, but like you're not putting together a coherent roster to be able to give these coaches as short of a leash as you're giving them. Now, with that being said, I mean, you can sit here and argue that Frank Reich's an awful coach versus he doesn't have the tools, but since there hasn't been much growth on that team, and they have just essentially fizzled out. I mean, you have a strong point. It's absolutely insane. And I'm taking a look at the depth in their coaching staff, and I don't really see much, to be honest with you. None. I mean, by comparison to other teams that at least have had other potential former head coaches or at least notable coordinators, which is good. I mean, give these guys a chance to shine and maybe even be a head coach and go from there.
So this all went downhill when they fired Steve Wilkes, who had them on the right path, and they fired him after a year, and so they've never been right since. So number 4, Bert, the Philadelphia Eagles are touched by the hand of God. Down 10 at the half to both the Bills and the Chiefs, Bert.
Yeah.
Somehow pulled it out by the grace of God. I mean, the refs, because Josh Allen was horse-collared, had his jersey ripped off of him right in front of a referee. Sean Hockley, you'll never be your daddy. Stop trying. Said, yeah, that wasn't a horse collar. So not only did Josh Allen have half his jersey ripped off his body, quite literally, they called him for intentional grounding when Gabe Davis, or I believe Reggie Gilliam, one of the two, were 2 feet away from where the ball landed. Somehow ended up as intentional grounding. Obviously, we had to punt the ball away. It was awful. Which leads me to number 3, Bert. The NFL has an officiating problem. A big one.
Oh, I mean, yeah. But this, in all fairness, we'll say the league favorites, and of course, we know the league's going to favor big market teams and teams that have won. And if you look at comparisons, particularly in primetime games too, you'll see the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles this year. There have been more lenient calls against them than their opponents all season. And I'm going to dig and try to see if somebody has pulled this data, because I'm sure it's in there. But I mean, you go back to week, what was it, 2 or 3, to or whenever it had to be the 2, 3, or 4, whenever Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift start dating, because we had the primetime game with the Jets Chiefs that the Jets almost won.
Yep.
So, but if you go back, there was horrible officiating from that. But carrying through, I mean, even to now, what is the NFC golden child for the NFL, which is the Eagles. And there is a blatant problem in missed calls. And I don't understand why we can't just review and correct. Yeah. Football is very much a game of inches. It takes 30 seconds to have somebody in a booth say, hey, you got that call wrong, reverse it. Okay, sure, no problem.
You know, it'd be crazy if like they could just have referees in the skybox, and whenever a call happens, they can just say, hey, you got that wrong. Oh, wait, it did happen.
Yeah.
In the XFL. It was beautiful. They had a little Xbox controller, watching video. It was great. Real time. Took no time at all for referees to say, hey, man, you missed that holding call, or it wasn't holding, or it was this. It really wasn't that. NFL and Sean Hockley, they do these. There's no accountability for the refs. They're not punished in any way. They're not fined in any way. Like, okay, you don't get to call the Super Bowl. Like, you probably weren't going to call it anyway. So, it's you know, and you're still going to get paid your $1 million or whatever you make. In my life, the officiating across the board, and this really isn't about the Bills or the Eagles game. I mean, I've seen it in other games where the officiate, like, some of the calls are just like, wait, what? Like, what is? Yeah. It's just, and then also to not. Like, we have all this technology. Like, they show the replay room. Dean Blandino, he sits up there in that little, you know, eagle eye office he has, and they have 20 billion cameras. Nobody's allowed to shoot down to the refs, say, hey, that's not an intentional grounding. Hey, that's this. It's unbelievable that the NFL won't do that, and it's bad. One of these players is going to punch a referee in the face one day.
Yeah.
To put it in context, Bert, at halftime of the Bills-Eagles game, the Bills had 10 penalties for 75 yards. The Eagles had 1 penalty for 5 yards. That's the discrepancy is too large. That's so if you're one of those NFL is scripted guys, you had a strong case with that Bills-Eagles game for sure.
Yeah.
Number 2, Bert. This one's for you. TD. Tommy DeVito. What it stands for, Bert. I messed up my own joke, so I'm going to start over. Number 2. Do you know what TD stands for?
Touchdown. Man.
The passing paisano. DeVito dime. The goal line Goodfellas. Bert, Tommy DeVito might be the best quarterback in New York since Eli Manning. I don't know.
No way.
There's something about this Tommy. Hey, Tommy DeVito. There's something about where's the gabagool? Like, there's something about Tommy DeVito. Like, he still lives at home with his mom. He's got that Jersey juice. I mean, you have to be feeling pretty good as a Giants fan. I know it's not pretty.
No.
Dad looks like the Sopranos. So you can't say anything bad about Tommy DeVito because him and his brother and his dad might come break your legs and throw you in the Hudson. But
that's
let
fair.
me tell you.
That's a fair point.
But again, you don't have to be Aaron Rodgers out here. You don't have to be Dan Marino. As long as you're moving the offense, and you said it earlier, the Giants had issues running the ball, but and again, they're playing the Patriots, but a win is a win is a win. And Tommy DeVito looks pretty, and he has looked pretty good, and dare I say, progressing every game he plays. This is his 3rd game. He's looked more confident, and I've seen plays made by him that veterans make, not 3rd-string quarterbacks, like poise in the pocket, moving the pocket, shifting up in the pocket, not being rattled, making big throws. He's done it all. Anything you needed him to do. And if you were a Daniel Jones guy, and we like Danny Dimes, we're not anti-Danny Dimes, but there is something to be said that Daniel Jones hasn't really looked much better than he was when who was the Ben McAdoo or whoever the coach before was.
Joe Judge.
And so Joe Judge, Tommy Toughnuts over there fighting players. I forgot about Joe Judge. Scrub. What a scrub. So, but to see DeVito clearly getting better from game to game is at least something you can say, okay, there might be something. Let's see what happens with this kid. What do you think?
No, I mean, look, he's coming in, but he had a really good game against Washington.
Yeah.
And then I'll say a decent outing against the Pats. Obviously coming in and completely getting smacked by Dallas. It's one of those things where he's serviceable as a backup. Obviously, with the contract we have with Danny Dimes, we're not replacing him. But yeah, I think as Giant fans, we didn't have expectations that he was going to come in and turn it around. In fact, by the time he did come into the season, we were hoping that they would just lose out so we can get a better draft pick. Instead, he's doing the opposite and he's winning games, which is quite annoying, to be honest with you. But but listen, serviceable and there. So why not, you know?
Number one, Bert. Fire Sean McDermott. Fire him. The season's already over. There's no point in waiting. At least lift this black, bald, clapping cloud away from my team. Get the stench of mediocrity and poor clock management away from my goddamn football team. I'm so sick of this guy. I am so sick of Sean McDermott kneeling 20 seconds left in a halftime when we were already up 10. You could have put the game away from there.
Yeah.
Your defense, you're supposed to be a defensive coach. You let Jalen Hurts basically on one leg run the length of the field. I like Joe Brady taking over as OC. Our offense is insane. There's nothing bad I can say about Joe Brady. James Cook dropped an early touchdown, which really hurt. And then the play where Gabe Davis ran one way and Josh Allen threw the ball another way. There was clearly a miscommunication. That would have won the game right there because that was in overtime. Joe Brady immediately stepped in and said, he knows whose fault it was, but he said, it's my fault. I didn't communicate the play properly. Like he knew whose fault that was, but as a leader, he took accountability for that. And so I like him. I wouldn't be mad if we fired McDermott and just I've seen enough in 2 games from Joe Brady to roll, because what did I say when I first months ago talked about, even a year ago when I talked about replacing Sean McDermott, I said we need a young person who is in tune with today's game, offensive minded. Our offense hasn't looked as good as when Dable was here in the last 2 weeks. Our offense has looked magnificent. Josh Allen literally doing everything for the team. We are a little bit too Josh Allen reliant, but there was a lot of these 3rd and shorts, and we kept giving the ball to James Cook because Sean McDermott has a hard on for him. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what would be nice? Maybe if we had a guy like Leonard Fournette to get those 2 or 3 yards because he's a big, strong back. Oh, wait. We do have Leonard Fournette.
Yeah.
He's sitting on the practice squad 4 weeks after we've signed him.
Yeah.
I hate you, Sean McDermott. Get away from my team. Just go away. And I hear Bills fans, and I've been on this train, and now I'm starting to see it from Bills media.
So you've been on this since like week 2.
Yes. And I've been on it hard. I've been on it since 13 seconds, really, if you want to be real about it. But really, really on it since technically week 1. That first loss to the Jets against Zach Wilson, I was like, I'm done with this guy. That is impossible. But now I'm getting support from Bills media. A lot of them are kind of seeing what I'm talking about. And I was having a conversation with one of the guys earlier, and I said, Andy Reid was wildly successful with Philadelphia. He went to a Super Bowl with Donovan McNabb, T.O., and them boys against the Patriots where Donovan McNabb threw up, and they lost. A few years later, the Eagles and Andy Reid said, enough is enough.
Yeah.
Time to part ways. Then what happened? Andy Reid went on to win 2 Super Bowls, and the Eagles went on to win a Super Bowl. Sometimes you have to cut your loss. The guys, you remember Dick Duran and Wade Phillips. You want to go back to those years. Those guys didn't have Josh Allen. And that's not a good reason. Again, you're so used to losing. You're so used to mediocrity. You will accept the half glass full as full instead of wanting better. I don't know what the future holds. I just know what Sean McDermott is doing, and he ain't doing shit. And it's time to move on because you are wasting Josh Allen, one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the league, and you're absolutely wasting his talent and his time. You're wasting Stephon Diggs' talent, and you're wasting his time. And so there has to be and he's out of scapegoats, right? He already used Dorsey, Leslie Frazier. They silently booted out of there last year. He decided to call the plays himself.
Yep.
And honestly, the offense isn't the reason we're losing the games. Yes, there were some drops. Yes, there were some miscues, but the defense is just letting teams back in. We could have been up 17. We were up 10, whatever it was. We let them march right on back and take the game over. That lands squarely on the shoulders of Sean McDermott. So, yeah, he needs to be fired.
I mean, I don't disagree. And I mean, you brought up the fact that the Eagles parted ways with Andy Reid. The Eagles also parted ways with Doug Peterson too. I mean, he brought them a Super Bowl.
He won the Super Bowl. Yeah.
So it is one of those things where, look, if you're not, like I said before, the leash has never been shorter on head coaches. If you're not going to get it done or show improvement, see ya. There are tons of other head coaches that are available, or coaches in general, that should be able to interview and try to get things going. And to your point about someone being younger and more in tune with the game, what are we seeing with all of these old head coaches, Bill Belichick included? Like they're not doing well. They have to go, with the exception of Andy Reid, of course. I mean, nothing's going to change that. But yeah, no, they've got to go.